back to the 13th Destiny podcast with Magnum. And of course, my co-host is Danielle Long, is standing by in San Diego. And we also,
Hello.
There she is, and we also have a very special guest standing by on the other line. So just hang tight, because this is going to be a fascinating show today. All right, real quick, my typical shout out for our local Holiday Inn University Plaza Hotel at 1021 Wilkerson Trace here in Bowling Green. And be sure to check them out if you're visiting here. And also you can go there and eat. Has a great restaurant outside of the hotel itself. And also they manage the Sloan Convention Center, which is owned by the city of Bowling Green, Kentucky. Also, Oak Grove Racing and Gaming. Also, big shout out to them down there in Oak Grove, Kentucky. Appreciate everything you guys do. And also, every time I've been down there, you guys are awesome, especially the security staff. You've always treated me great. And they are near Fort Campbell, Kentucky, the home of the 101st Airborne. And, of course, also near Clarksville, Tennessee. All right, so let's dive into this a little bit. And I am going to welcome to the show, Synova Cantrell. Tell us a little bit about yourself first, and then we'll get into our talk about the Dixie Mafia.
Hi guys, thank you for having me. My name's Synova. I am a true crime writer who's been on hiatus for a bit. I kind of went into life coaching for my victims advocacy part of my business, and but I was Southwest Missouri's #1 true crime writer. I've written about over 300 cases on my blog. At one time, it went out to a potential 500,000 people. I ran a few cold cases in Texas and was working on some of those, and I had the honor of a victim's family member calling their congressman, and the governor actually heard about it, and he flew a flag over Washington, D.C. in honor of my cold case work, had it folded and sent to me. And so that was, no matter what kind of trophies I ever get from now on, that one's the most special to me. So, but that's what I do. I've kind of been drawn back into the world of cold cases and true crime with some of the different things that are in the news right now, with the Dixie Mafia stuff and the Buford Pusser stuff. That's basically a very quick rundown of the last 5 years of my existence.
Yes, and that's what we're going to talk about today. We're going to talk about the Dixie Mafia and some on Buford Pusser, and certainly you have this is a newer book, right? The Dawn of the Dixie Mafia, correct?
Yes. Yeah, The Dawn of the Dixie Mafia just came out a few years ago, and it actually, I'm looking to see the copyright, because I actually have 13 published books, and I'm like, did I publish this one before that one? Yeah. Okay, so this one actually came out at the 1st of 2021.
Okay.
So it's fairly new book. It's actually the second book I wrote about the Dixie Mafia, but it's actually the one that's more in depth. It's got all the pictures. It's got all of the research and things that I had been doing for several years, and I just compiled it all into one book.
Well, I like the fact that you said 13 books. That just worked out perfectly for our show.
Exactly.
That is awesome. Danielle, would you like to ask Synova some questions on the Dixie Mafia to start with, and then I'll ask them as well, so we can cross back and forth with her?
Yes. What made you decide to write about the Dixie Mafia?
Well, I started out, I'm from Texas, kind of raised in the hills of Missouri and various other places. So I'm Southern, and I'd heard all these, rumors and things all my life growing up in the hills, and about bootleg whiskey and, all that kind of stuff. You're raised with it. It's not that big a deal. It's common. But I was a true crime writer, and my whole concept as a crime writer was I was working on behalf of the victim's family. I wanted to get them enough publicity to help solve a case that the news media had forgotten about. So I was taking all these obscure cases, and like I said, I wrote about 300 different cases, and I was blessed enough to raise enough publicity to help bring in leads that helped close 4 cases. And so that was, quite an honor to be able to do that. But in that fast track of chaos, I ran into a case that had some kind of little urban legend links to the Buford Pusser story. And I'd seen the movies, and of course we know that those are fictionalized. And so I never really thought much about it until I got into these cases. And then I started seeing all these patterns and linking all these cases together. And I was like, wait, that sounds like that job that I just wrote about, 3 months ago. And you start seeing the grassroots pattern of how the Dixie Mafia weaved its way through the South at its heyday. And then, the more I got involved, the more people would come to me. I actually talked to a few. I actually talked to the son of one of the major hitters in the Dixie Mafia. He had some deathbed confessions of his father, and he actually called me and talked to me for several hours. And I don't know if he will ever follow through and write a book about his dad, but he definitely has enough content he could. So I mean, I kind of, once you go down that rabbit trail, it's like any conspiracy or anything like that. You just have to hold on for the ride, because you open that one can of worms, and then you're sucked into this vortex. And I was on a ride, and it didn't matter that I even tried to step away and change my career to something else. The Dixie Mafia and Buford Pusser keep pulling me back. They're like, hey, would you do a TV show? Hey, would you do, and I'm just like, oh, okay, I'm just going to go with it. I'm just going to go for the ride and see what happens. And that's what happens when you get involved in any of these kind of things.
And you have been on TV shows.
I'm sorry?
And you have been on TV shows, correct?
Oh, yeah. I have. I was on the Discovery Channel a year ago. See, it's been almost a year. In March of last year, I was shipped out to Tennessee, and they paid my way to go out there, and my whole family got put up in a hotel, and they filmed me for 10 hours, and they wanted to do a pilot series and start a whole new spin-off series of the Moonshiner Show. And so they were using me and a few other key people, interviewing us about Buford Pusser and the State Line Mob and all of those things. And the guy told me, I said, well, what are you doing this for now, And he's like, well, he's hoping to do a spin-off series. Well, it didn't get picked up, and anybody that's in the business knows that you could do 30 pilots and one might get picked up, so it's not uncommon.
Right.
But they were filming enough to do a whole pilot of the series spinning off of the Moonshiners TV show. Instead, it was added on as an episode, so everything got condensed down and cut way down. I told a friend of mine, I was upset. I was there for 10 hours on camera nonstop. I wasn't feeling well. I was sicker than a dog. I just terrible. And I did it for 10 hours, and then you end up with about 20 minutes of screen time. I was like, this sucks. But that's the business. That's the way it goes.
Oh, I know enough about we know enough about the business.
Use that footage. They might use that footage and do something with it later. Who knows?
You brought up the fact that also the State Line Mob when you were mentioning that. Let's talk a little bit about the Dixie Mafia and the connection to the State Line, because it's very fascinating. All these characters, I always found these characters to be very fascinating, regardless of them being the bad guys. They are absolutely fascinating in so many different ways.
Right. Well, see, that's the way I am about Buford Pusser. He's one of those that people he's a gray,
right?
As in on the gray line. And nowadays he wouldn't make it as a law officer whatsoever.
Oh no, absolutely not.
The day that he was, they needed a type of vigilante justice in the Wild West of the area he was in. That's what they needed, and so that's what he became. But to me, I'm always fascinated in himself, because he stood up for something. He got knocked down. He stood up again. And He stood up again. He lost his face. He lost his wife. He's shot 7 times and stabbed 8, or vice versa. I get those mixed up. And then he was ambushed. All of a sudden, he stands up again. He stands up again. To me, that's a personality trait that is kind of being bred out of us in society nowadays. And so I find him fascinating, whichever side of the law you think he's on. I think it's interesting, and that's the way it was. He was up against people like Towhead White. Mm-hmm. Towhead White was the linchpin link that linked the State Line Mob to the Dixie Mafia.
Absolutely.
But Towhead White is the guy that is the connection between the two. Everyone else. They were just local moonshiners. They were thugs, but they were just a bunch of locals. They didn't necessarily have the connections that he had, and then also they had priorities. They still had families. They still had a little bit of local pride in themselves. So they took care of their own, even though they were criminals. You hear a lot of stories about Louise Halfcock. She's a pistol. If you want to talk about her.
Wow, yeah.
But there's so much people out there that's like, she's bad. And I was like, yeah, she was bad. She was total bad. But, she was badass. Let's just put it that way. But here's the thing. She, can I say ass? Sorry.
Yeah, you can.
You
can. First. Yeah, you can. Yeah.
Sorry. But that's who she was. But she made lots of money through her illegal activities. And she took care of her own community. If there was a widow in the community that just lost her spouse, we're talking after the Depression, we're talking where a woman didn't have very many options to take care of her own, she would take care of that widow and that child.
Yeah.
So we're talking about a local thing that, there was still that sense. But Towhead White was the one, he didn't give a crap about nobody. He didn't care.
That's true.
He literally had a life goal. Towhead White had a life goal. He wanted to be the Al Capone of the South. And when he died, in his FBI file, they put he was the biggest hoodlum in the South. So he was the dangerous one. He was the one that really butted heads with Buford Pusser.
Oh yeah,
and
many
he
times.
Was the one that was actually all over the map. All over the South. There's 13 states across the South that the Dixie Mafia really kind of run their criminal empire through, and he has crimes in all of them. And so he was the real one that tied the moonshining local gang to the Dixie Mafia. Did I answer your question?
Wow! Did you ever? I think you way answered the question. I wasn't expecting all that, but that's very good detail. Danielle, what else would you like to add in to ask to her on this stuff with the Dixie Mafia and the state line connection?
Yes, just for those that might be listening that doesn't know, what is the Dixie Mafia? When was it started? All that kind of good stuff.
Well, the Dixie Mafia is the alternate. Everyone knows about the Italian Mafia. They know about that. They've got all of this because Hollywood has publicized it. They've got all of this ideas in their head. Well, the Italian Mafia is based on bloodlines. It's based on there's a family dynamic between it. There's hierarchies. There's rules that they live by. They don't kill women. They don't kill unless they're not supposed to. They're not supposed to kill public officials because it brings too much heat. They have rules that they live by. But what people don't know is the Dixies were actually hired out to the Italians sometimes when the Italians wanted a job done, but it went against their own code. They'd hire a Dixie to do it because the Dixies, they wanted money. They would work with anybody, any little group, any little gang, anything. They would work with anybody as long as it benefited them. There was hierarchy, but it was, I ask people, and this kind of ages me, shows people how old I am, but if you watch the Dukes of Hazzard TV show, it's a very comedy style of TV show, but it shows you the actual dynamic of how the Dixie Mafia was set up. You've got the cop that was bought off, and then you've got the boss of the county. The boss is the one that handles all the crime in that county. Boss Hogg would work with that boss, and that boss would work with that boss, and Roscoe just ran around and did his bidding. Now, of course, they were both a bunch of bumbling idiots, and that's what made the comedy of the show. And then, of course, you got a hot car and all that kind of fun stuff. But the concept was that's the way it was formed. In this area, this boss took care of the crime in this area. If you went into somebody's territory, you needed to talk to the boss, or you needed to have enough firepower to overtake the boss. And that's kind of the way it was. There wasn't any, godfather of this or godfather of that. It was all very territorial, but it was also kind of an open border. Everyone could do anything as long as they gave a cut to the boss and they got permission first.
Yeah.
Did that answer your question? Because I'm still, I could go on for days.
Yeah, but I read a little bit about them. I thought that there was no, when they formed, there was no, Italian, it was just a bunch of different people, different nationalities coming together. Out of what exactly? They came together, right? It wasn't in the 60s and 70s?
No. This is what my book, Dawn of the Dixie Mafia, is about. Just a shameless plug there. What people don't realize is the Dixie Mafia actually started in an area in Phoenix City, Alabama. Phoenix City, I have a report. It's by Major Cullen O'Connor. He was a general, to General Haggerty. It says, the most deadly enemy you will face in the entirety of your career is the Dixie Mafia that's based out of Phoenix City, Alabama. That's where it started. If you go back and you go through your history, you will find that Phoenix City was just wide open. There was nothing that was
off limits,
illegal there, and they killed people and put them in the swamps. They took advantage of soldiers really bad, because the soldiers right across the fort, the water at the fort, they were, they'd go on their weekend holiday over there, and then they would. Sometimes they just they wouldn't come back. They'd just be dead and nobody know what happened to them. But anyways, it was so bad that they declared martial law in there. And they sent the general in, and he literally boiled over the town with tanks and pushed out the criminal element. Of course, there was a lot of publicity and show. There was a few stragglers of the criminal element that they made a big publicized trials on and arrest and everything to make the public think that everything was fine. We just wiped out the Sin City, okay? Unfortunately, that's not the way it works. All of the puppeteers that were working behind the scenes, they just spread out. And they went to the state line, and that's what became the core group of the state line mob. All of the puppeteers went there.
McNairy County, Tennessee, and Alcorn, Mississippi.
It was an outpost. It was a lawless outpost back in the Civil War days. I mean, that was a known hotspot for criminal activity right there in that area. And so they just went there. They already had goons there. They already had workers there. They already had, little bars and clubs there. It was just not that big of a deal until they went through and busted up Phoenix City. And once they did, you'll notice across the map, there are several different hot spots in Georgia. There's J.C. Hawkins was the boss hog up there in a certain spot in Georgia. I did an article on him, and people didn't even realize the first RICO indictment wasn't against the Italian mob. It was against the Dixies.
Mm-hmm.
The Dixie Mafia. It was taken out on the Dixie Mafia, and they took out J.C. Hawkins and his drug running in Georgia. I can't remember if it was a year or 3 years before they did the big publicized thing on the Italians in New York. But that's where it came from. It actually came from there.
I kind of knew that from living in Georgia, by the way, for a short time. So, yeah. So, yeah, I was aware of that.
There wasn't... Well, what I read was there wasn't any kind of formed... There wasn't like a leader. It was the one that made the most money. Is that true?
Yes.
It was. That's how they decided who the leader was.
Sort of. Yes. See, I did some interviews that I never really got to run with from an insider who ran with some bigwigs, and this person. I'm not sure if I'm allowed to say this person's name, so I'm not even going to say their gender. This person told me that the structure is more than what we thought. But from the outside looking in, you have just little local bosses that take over the crime in that area. And then those bosses will coordinate and work with other bosses. But then you have somebody like Kirksey Nix, who's actually in the news now, which we can segue into that later if you want.
Yes.
Kirksey Nix is labeled as the kingpin. Well, he was a runner and he was big. But I have a hard time thinking he was the kingpin because he's put away. Right. You know, I think he's the public kingpin. I think there's another one, or two, or whatever. But I was told by this individual that they actually ran it in segments. So you had the north end, the south end, the east end, and the west end. And all of that was still within that 13-state little pattern. So we're not talking like northern U.S. We're talking just the northern part of the South. You know, anything south of the Mason-Dixon is considered part of it. You can throw it all in there. But this person actually said that there was more structure to it behind the scenes than people realize, because I just asked. I said, to me, it seems like in the state line mob stuff, if you read my book, you will see that I actually think I know who the puppeteer was. That was actually, because if it was just moonshiners, just local moonshiners, not a lot of connections, just a bunch of local thugs and moonshiners and running girls or whatever they're wanting to do, if that's all it was, Buford wouldn't have had that big of a problem.
No, he wouldn't have.
He'd come into a corrupt system that had so many bought-off judges, so many bought-off, lawyers. Everything was so bought off. I'm like, who bought them off? Mm-hmm. We're not talking about the small-time hoods. So I went all the way back to Phoenix City. And I started doing my research, and I run a few things through. And if you go through and you read all of the books, see, there are some books that hate Buford Pusser. There are some books that love him. There are some books that make him a god. I don't. I read everything because I take in all the information, and somewhere in the middle is the truth. Right. And so I take in all the information. But when it comes to him, he should have been able to handle the state line. Somebody else was pushing things behind the scene. And so I look, and in my book, I talk about a gentleman that they called Nelson. And he owned the majority of the land around there. He had leased it out to these different people. He was a huge businessman. He was the deacon of the church. He was the political person. He was the war hero. He had gone to war twice. And yet, he's the one that seemed to everyone was afraid of. All the criminal element was afraid of it. We're talking even Louise Hathcock, the queen bee of the state line mob, was afraid of Nelson. And I'm like, why would she be afraid of him? If she's the one buying everybody off, if she's the big man on campus here, why is she afraid of this man? And so I kind of make a case for there's always a puppeteer behind the scenes. Somebody that's got plenty of money, somebody that's got plenty of power, but they're kind of hidden in the shadows because they don't want to be the face of it.
Wow. That is something I hadn't heard until just now. And
I told you, I'll give you some behind the scenes stuff.
Yeah.
It's always good for marketing. But that is something, if you research it out, and that's the thing, I give in the back of my book, I give a list of all of the other books, all of the newspaper articles, everything so you can do your own research and say, okay, I agree with her or I don't. And I challenge anybody that wants to go through and look through all of the stuff, see if you can find another shadow puppeteer. Right. In what I've found, I haven't found anyone else. Nobody else carried that level of power other than him.
Mm-hmm. And as you say about Buford, whether you loved him or hated him. I mean, he was a stubborn guy, and he wasn't going to take a bunch of stuff. And I think that's where the clash been. But like you said, these locals on the state line mob should have been easier to handle than they were. And obviously, somebody was pushing stuff from beyond the state line. And of course, now Buford had a contract with Moores and stuff. I've read their stuff too. But I mean, you know, some of that stuff you have to like sift through with the state line, with the state, with the Dixie, you know, and try to get all the clarity, because there's so, and of course now it's been so many years. There's so much stuff that has you know, just disappeared because of the fact that, well, whoever is running these things from the outside or was running from the outside. And I'll ask you this real quick, and then I'll let Danielle ask some more questions. The one thing that I have heard about these two particular, the one of the main, you said about not having any like really main ethics or whatever, or codes or what. The one thing I always heard about both of these two entities, the only thing that they really, outside of making the money, was don't snitch. You know, you were done. Yeah. They had a big thing with that more than any other criminal organization. That was kind of their thing. You know, you can do whatever, and we'll help, and that's fine, but don't snitch. So.
Yeah, exactly. And the Dixies were there was a lot of very brutal characters that I would even class as more like psychopathic serial killers in the Dixies.
Oh, yeah.
And they didn't care. As long as you kept your mouth shut, they didn't care what you did. They'll help you cover it up. They will, you know, bring in a team from out of state to do the hit, so you're covered and nobody looks at you. They'll do whatever, but don't snitch. That's
right.
it.
Right, and I think that's why
back just before you said something that made me think. When you're researching this case, you need to understand one very big tactic of the Dixie Mafia, and this is something that law enforcement has proven on later cases, but it's something that really affects the Buford Pusser story. The Dixie Mafia has a tactic that the moment they do a job, they automatically employ a false narrative.
Yes.
So they automatically start the rumor mill, the rumor mill, and then they automatically start laying out false evidence. And so when you go down to McNairy County and you talk to someone, they're going to be very legitimate with you. They're going to be honest to God truth. This is what my grandpa told me, and he's an honest guy, and I guarantee you he wouldn't lie to me, and I guarantee you that he wouldn't. But he heard a rumor that was started by the perpetrator.
Absolutely, and they believed it.
50 years ago, and it's still continuing to this day. And so when you start studying cases like this, you really have to be careful, and that's the reason why I say I read everything, because you want to know every legend, every fact, every fiction, everything, and then you want to try to step back from that, look at it like a puzzle, and find the center. And that's usually where the truth is right there in the middle. It's not on either side. It's somewhere in the middle there.
Yes, I have an aunt that still lives in McNairy, so I do. She has quite. She has quite told me that you can ask different people different things, and it's based on, you know, did they know Buford personally, or did they get this just from rumors and things from the area? So yeah, she mentioned rumors before, so yeah, that makes very good sense.
Yeah, well, and too, you got to understand too, Buford doesn't have a lot of family left.
No,
most everybody over there is descendants of the criminals he put away.
Exactly.
So looking at everything from a legal standpoint, you've got to understand that that's an automatic conflict of interest right there.
Right. And I
so
guess
you have to go at.
Yeah.
Go ahead. Sorry.
I was gonna say, and I guess Dewana was the last real defender of her dad.
Yeah.
You know, and you know, it's a sad thing that how, you know, she's gone now, but yeah. But McNairy is a very interesting place.
I'm there. I told him I'd step up. I was like, you know, I told my husband, I said, this is one case I have to step up for.
Right.
I just have to. You know, he's not my dad, but I don't like they wait until Dewan is gone and then they start stuff.
Yeah, and I won't mention one person.
I like a fair fight.
Yeah, I
don't
don't.
mind a fight as long as it's fair.
I'm not gonna. You probably know who I'm talking about. I'm not gonna give him publicity by name or anything. But I mean, we've got a person out there right now that's trying to defame him like nobody's business, and it's crazy that he only talks.
He spent 20 years doing that.
Yeah, he's only talking to the bad guys.
Yeah, he got on a call with me once, and I listened to all the stuff, because like I said, I take all of the information, all of it, even the stuff that I don't agree with.
Right.
I took his information too. I took it in, and I considered it.
Right.
But my thought on it is, and I told him this, I said, it takes a very little person to spend a lifetime trying to defame a dead person.
Absolutely. Thank you. I'm so glad. We're on the same wavelength with that. Yes. Okay, we are absolutely on the same wave on that one. Danielle, next question from you have for Synova on all this stuff. Are you still with me, Danielle?
Yes. I'm sorry. I'm listening and I'm going, how am I feeling right now? And I was wondering if going into any of these cases and writing about them, have you ever received any kind of like death threats, or don't write about this, or don't get into this, or even, from anybody?
I have received death threats, but it's from a source. Well, let's put it this way. I have some family members that were ex-street people, and I got some threats from somebody that's actually kin to me.
Oh, wow.
I was like, all right, just come on, let's see what you got. But that's family. No, actually, because I've been very respectful about things. I had some Dixie Mafia people call me.
Oh, wow.
Said, what do you know about it? How dare you? Because they listened to me and they thought I sounded like I come from Chicago. And I said, you have no idea how much I've worked on my accent. You have no idea. I said, I go to Tennessee, and I'm like there for 3 days. I was like, oh my gosh, this feels like home. And my husband's like, we got to get you out of here. You're starting to sound like you be here. Because I try. See, I'm from Texas. I'm a Tex-Mex Texican. I was raised for part of my life. I had Spanish nannies and stuff. So I have the Tex-Mex going on. I've got the Southern drawl going on. And then I come to Missouri. They couldn't understand me, so they put me in speech therapy. And I'm just like, it ain't my fault you can't understand English.
I feel you.
So I was a mess. But anyways, I got off into a tangent. What was your question? Did I get death threats? Yes, I've gotten death threats, but it was a family affair, so I wasn't too concerned. But I tried to be. Where I was going with that, I had a Dixie Mafia person who claimed to be part of Dixie Mafia. I never vetted him out to make sure. He asked me, what did I know about it, who I've been talking to, and I was like, I got everything off the internet, but I basically told him, everything I have is public knowledge. I haven't, and he was very respectful and everything, and he was just wanting to make sure that I wasn't making up a bunch of stuff that wasn't true to make them look worse, make them look bad.
That actually sounds like that actually might be a Dixie Mafia. Yeah.
I said, he's like, because there's a lot of people who claim to be Dixie Mafia that are good, upstanding citizens, and that's just kind of a moniker that they've taken. And I'm like, well, that's not who I'm writing about. I'm writing about, characters that are in the news.
Right. And some who are not even here anymore.
So no, I haven't. Yeah, and most of this is cold cases and stuff. Now, Kirksey Nix is still here, and I did hear a rumor through things that he wanted to talk to me, but I haven't gone.
Wait a minute. Hold on. You just threw me for a loop. Kirksey Nix actually wants to talk to somebody that writes this kind of stuff, and he said the person I talked to said that he had read my stuff. And he had heard of me,
and if he was going to talk to anybody, he might consider talking to me. So
wow.
I never did. The guy was trying to encourage me to write him a letter, and I never did. And so I'm hesitant about it because I'm sitting here going, I don't know how far I can vet the guy that I was talking to. And so I'm sitting here going, this could just be somebody trying to talk to me.
Right.
You know what I'm saying? Because at that point, I had quite a big name that people were recognizing. And so I always have to I'm hesitant about it because I'm sitting here going, well, yeah, is this just an excuse for you to talk to me? And Kirksey has no idea I exist, and I send him this letter out of nowhere.
Exactly.
So I never followed through with it because I thought, well...
Yeah, because you shocked me because Kirksey's not really known for doing that. That's why I was kind of shocked.
Absolutely. He ain't going to talk to nobody.
Yeah, because
we're talking about somebody that's I don't know. We're talking about somebody who's so stubborn. He still has a bullet in him that he will not let them remove because he knows it's gonna incriminate him in a murder trial. So I'm sitting there going,
wow.
He actually almost bled out because he wasn't going to let his people take him to the hospital after the gunfight with the grocery store owner that he killed. He was going to bleed out, and his people forced him to go to the hospital. His people took him across the state line and dumped him in a hospital so he could get treatment for his gunshot wounds, or he probably wouldn't have been in prison for the murder that he's in prison for.
Exactly. And Danielle, I don't know if you know this. I don't know how much you were able to research before. Kirksey Nix was also named by Buford Pusser as part of the ambush stuff. Although it's never been proven.
It's the ambush team.
Yeah, it's never been proven. But I think that's because, to my theory about Kirksey Nix is he just is not going to talk about anything, and certainly not that because I mean that would just turn everything upside down, now wouldn't it? Yeah.
Well, and do you want me to lead into what's in the news now here? Because this is a good segue for it.
Yeah, Danielle, you want to let her do that? You want to let her do that, and we'll listen to what she has to say. Yeah, let's hear it.
I want to hear.
Okay, let's go.
Well, because this is the good segue for it. When it comes to Kirksey Nix has been implicated in a lot of things, and that's the reason why they call him the kingpin. I don't necessarily think he's a kingpin because I think he was very up in things, but I don't think he was the kingpin because he was the very public, let's put him away. So I think he was the front, he was the face. There's always the puppeteer behind. So I don't necessarily think he's the kingpin, even though that's what they've labeled him as. Buford Pusser said in the ambush that happened, he believed Kirksey Nix was the shooter in the car that ambushed him and his wife on New Hope Road on, I think it was April 12th.
No, August 12th, 1967.
August 12th.
Yeah, August 12th.
And so that was where that came from. And he believed the reason being is just before this, a short time before this, Buford Pusser was called to another incident at the Shamrock Motel.
Yes. And
he ended up in a shootout with Louise Hathcock, which we talked about, which happened to be an on and off girlfriend of Towhead White. Now, I don't necessarily think that this is because Towhead White was so in love with Louise Hathcock. I think it was Louise Hathcock was his connection to the State Line Mob, and she had lots of money, and I don't think there was any necessarily love lost between the two.
Right.
But he was her fling, but he was in prison at the time. Buford ended up killing Louise Hathcock. So the story goes, Towhead ordered a hit. So what does he do? And this is where you kind of get that little hint of the way the Dixie Mafia works. He doesn't call a hit from local guys. He calls a team from out of state. And that's where Kirksey Nix comes in. He gets a whole team from out of state to come in, hit the Pussers, and then move on. That's the way they run their hits. They don't get a local thug that everyone's going to recognize and trace back. They get someone from out of state. And we're talking back when there was no internet. There was very little communications between law enforcement offices and things like that. So it was very hard to connect it all the way back to another state. Unfortunately, Buford Pusser had run-ins with this type before, and he knew Kirksey Nix. So when everything came about, he's like, I think that's Kirksey Nix. I have seen him before, because of all the publicity and news around Kirksey Nix. So in reality, Kirksey Nix may or may not have been the shooter that took out Pauline Pusser and shot his face off. And I believe this is the thing. A few days ago, and like I said, this is what's drawn me back into this realm again, because I was going a different direction. I wake up and my phone is exploding because everybody's asking me all across the news, 57 years later, they are exhuming the body of Pauline Pusser.
Yes.
Because there was never an autopsy done on Pauline Pusser. Nobody knows why. The few connections I have in McNairy County, they either cannot talk to me or they don't know anything. Most of them don't know anything.
Yeah.
But I have three main theories. Why? Well, one, you've got, he that shall not be named, trying to discredit. Maybe he's kicked up enough stink. He's somebody's doing something. I doubt that. The other thing is
they don't like him over there in McNairy. Trust me.
Right. Well, they've got some other theories things that could have happened during the ambush that could have kicked up enough stink. But the main thing, a few days before you see this, or a few months, it all ties in within just a real short time. All of a sudden, you see headlines. The Dixie Mafia is back in the news. After 57 years, the Dixie Mafia is back in the news. Why? Okay. Kirksey Nix is 80-something years old.
Yes.
He's got health problems, and he's trying to petition for a humanitarian release from prison. And then all of a sudden, the T.B.I. announces that they're going to exhume Pauline's body, and they're going to do all this, and they're like rushing on this cold case that nobody talked about. So, 3 years ago when I was writing this book, I had to pound the pavement. I had to fly. I drove out there. I say fly because I drive like a bat. But I had to fly out there, and I boots on the ground. I was tromping through the woods at the Shamrock Motel. I was doing all this myself, trying to dig, get somebody to pay attention to me and get some information. And then all of a sudden, the TBI's got it plastered everywhere. What happened? Well, to me, the only logical thing that would move a judge to sign on an exhumation is Kirksey Nix is wanting out of jail.
Absolutely. And
he's the key suspect.
Mm-hmm.
And so I think, honestly, that is the reason why we're seeing such a rush and a frenzy on a case that nobody's talked about hardly at all for 50 years.
Yeah, and real quick on that, one of the things, the original T.B.I. investigation, and I'm pretty sure you know about this, because they were trying to discredit, you were trying to say that he killed his wife and all that kind of BS. The original investigators eventually came to the conclusion, like, the odds of you being able to shoot her and shoot your face off yourself are, like, next to impossible. That there's no way
that... Let me get into that.
Because...
Let me get into that. I've been studying that. Do you realize what they found, ammunition for a 1918 Browning automatic rifle, a 30 caliber, a carbine.
Yeah.
It's a bar.
Yeah.
Is what they call it. Those freaking guns usually have to be mounted on something. They are 19 pounds.
Exactly. They are.
And they are 47 inches long. Okay? 47 inches long. This is a weapon that can empty its magazine in 20 rounds in 2.5 seconds. This is a weapon that the military hated because it was so heavy and hard to handle. Okay? So you're telling me that this man, because he's having marriage problems, which is the rumor mill that
the rumor mill.
See, this rumor started an hour after the call came in that Buford had been hit. Once it was announced over police radio, they started that rumor. And so this is Dixie Mafia in action. But that weapon right there, they said when they saw the car, and you can read all this in the original paperwork. I've got some of the original paperwork, copies, of course, but they said it looked like the car itself had been decapitated. They had just plowed so many rounds through that car.
Exactly.
And what they're telling you, and they're saying, okay, Buford Pusser had marriage problems, and he shot his wife, and to cover it up, he staged an ambush. Well, for one, why would you do that out in the middle of nowhere? Why not stage it at your own house? Okay?
Exactly.
Yeah, I have worked a lot of cases, so why not stage it at your own dang house? There is no reason why you couldn't stage it at your house.
And you're the sheriff of the county. I mean, come on.
An ambush? Yeah. So anyways, he's going to stage it. Let's say he staged it. He kills his wife. He goes out in the middle of nowhere. He plows bullets through the car. And then what is he going to do? This is what you need to see. When you look at his face in the there's crime scene photos available. There's pictures
I've
of
seen
his
them.
face.
Yeah, I've actually seen them.
Okay. Let me ask you something. His face is torn from the left side to the right side and hanging on his chest, right?
Uh-huh.
So that means he had to hold a 19-pound gun, 48 inches long, and somehow shoot one round into his own face with his non-dominant hand.
Exactly, because Buford Pusser is right-handed, if nobody knew that or not. I was aware of that, yes.
I did. Yep. He's right-handed. So I'm sitting here going, I don't care how big of a bull he is, because he was Buford the Bull. You know, he's a big, bad
I mean, he's a
guy.
big guy, yeah.
You can't hold a 19-pound gun in your non-dominant arm. And I'm sure he had long arms, too. But 47-inch long gun, and get the trigger and shoot yourself in the face in just the right way that you survive it.
Exactly, that's the other thing.
It's not scientifically possible.
A rifled round is going to possibly go anywhere. Yeah, yeah, there's no way, people. Anyone listening that thinks that Buford Pusser did that, they're really naive. I hate to be calling you out like that, but they are.
They really believe that he's the Superman. Because they're like, oh, he's no Superman. I was like, but if you believe that, he'd have to be Superman.
Exactly.
There's just, there's no way.
Exactly. Yeah, so Kersey's in the news again, and yeah, that's bringing all this to bear. And I mean, I think the T.B.I is doing the right thing, and yeah, let's put this to an end, and maybe finally get who was really behind that. That would be a great day. It's a shame that Buford Pusser is not here anymore. It's a shame that DeWanna's not here anymore. But that would be a great day for, I mean, at least the grandkids of Buford Pusser would at least know this, and this would be the end to this BS that has been going on for so long.
Yeah. Well, I'll tell you what my greatest fear is about the autopsy.
Okay.
Is that it's going to come back inconclusive.
Uh-oh.
And this BS continues.
Well, that could be true, too.
I hope that there is flat out 100% evidence to just absolutely prove Buford Pusser right and just shut up the naysayers forever.
Amen.
But I know after 57 years, I've seen, autopsy results from 57 years later, and they're most of the time inconclusive. So I am hoping that we get a result. So that's my biggest fear, is inconclusive, and then we just continue this on.
Yeah. Danielle, what do you think about that on the autopsy? Because I know you got about the possibility this could come up inconclusive because of 57 years.
Yeah, I don't know. I wouldn't like it to come up inconclusive, but it's very possible that it could.
Yeah. That would be a shame.
Well, I've seen a lot of them, and 57 years is a long time, and so I want an answer, and I think that's probably why, because it's the T.B.I said in the news report that they have the backing of the family, and I'm like, that's probably why the family is backing it.
Yes.
Because I always have a innate kind of a spiritual repulsion against exhumations, because that's a sacred thing. And I told my friend the other day when this all started, I said, if I'm in the ground, I said, leave me alone. You drove me crazy enough in life, just leave me there. So
yeah, I get that.
It's not something you take lightly.
No, you shouldn't.
But if this will put an end to all of this and give an answer, and then, too, this is what Buford Pusser continued to fight for. He needed the answer. He didn't have the answer, and he lost his wife. And so, in a way, if everything turns out and he's completely honest and legit about what happened, and that's what we prove, we've finished his race for him.
Amen.
So to me, I have a very big, I a different way of looking at it. I'm like, this is, I think of Elvis Presley's Walk On, that song, and it moves me every time I hear it. And I love it. I love to play it. I love to sing it. But nobody can do it like Elvis did. And that I think of Buford Pusser when I hear that. I think of just Walk On, and that's what he did. And to me, that's so powerful. I want to find an answer for him.
Absolutely.
Whether it's, whatever it is, and you think, well, how do you know? You're not related to them or anything. And it's just because I'm a very empathic person. But I find the story so powerful. Like I said, I told my spouse, this is the only thing that can drag me back into this.
Right.
And he's drugged me back 3 times. So I was like, finally, 3rd time's a charm. I'm done. I'm not fighting it no more. Here I am.
Right. Hey, real quick, Danielle, before we came on the air, she talked to me something about Buford Pusser as well, and we'll get into the empathic thing related to our paranormal stuff, since you spent some time there at the house and everything. That's what you were telling me, correct?
Yeah, I don't, not everyone goes down that rabbit hole, and so I don't normally, say a lot about it. But when you told me you did paranormal things, I thought, well, I'll let you know this if you're interested. But
we're interested.
I'm a very empathic person. I'm a very empathic person, and for most of my life, I was raised in a very religious family. And so for most of my life, I always just thought it was something wrong with me. You just care too much. But I felt the emotions. I felt the pain. I felt the anxiety. I felt the, and so I kind of ran from it for a while. But then I started learning what it is and how to experience it and how to kind of translate it a bit. Not real good at it, but I do know that at the time that I was there. See, I've been to Buford Pusser's museum a couple different times.
Me too.
And I have a picture of me, and I didn't share it because I was going through a lot of personal trauma, and I was sicker than a dog, and the picture looks horrible, and so I just couldn't share it, but I've saved it for myself because I could see what I was feeling. The camera crew was packing up. They was tearing down, and I filmed there in his kitchen, and then they were packing up and loading everything in the vans, and we were going to go to the next site. We was going to the Shamrock Motel site, I think, is where we was going next. But everybody was out, and everybody was, mealing around, getting their stuff together. But they were out of that room, and I was standing there with my hands on the counter, looking out over the room, and there was just so much pain there, so much pain, and it was overwhelming. I just stood there and was trying to fight back tears because I had to get back on camera, and I didn't want to wash my face off, but there was so much unresolved pain in that house. It was palpable. You could absolutely feel it, and I just stood there and it was almost enough to take my breath away. And I have never looked at this case quite the same since, because I know it's painful. I've read, I've seen autopsy photos, I've written about some gruesome things, but I've never felt such intense pain in a location in my life.
Yeah.
And in fact, you can tell a difference in my demeanor from the time if you watch it. You may not be able to catch it because I'm not on as much. They didn't put the whole 10 hours on there, obviously. But by the time I got to the ambush site, I was wiped out. I couldn't hardly do the show anymore. I couldn't hardly talk. They were having to feed me my lines constantly.
You were feeling all that.
It was overwhelming. And by the time we got to the ambush site, I was supposed to go to one more site. I went to the Shamrock Motel site, and then I went to the ambush site, and then I was supposed to go to the car crash site. And by the time, it took me so long, I think that, and then compounded by the time I got to the ambush, I'm so sick when I got to the ambush site. I looked around, and they had a hard time filming there, and I'm not necessarily an environmentalist, but I believe we should take care of God's creation. We shouldn't litter and all that. There was so much trash and crap just thrown all over the place. They had a hard time filming around it because the place wasn't kept up. And
you know what? That's ironic because it was like that when I was there.
Yeah, it just devastated me.
Yeah.
By the time I got to the ambush site, it took me longer at the ambush site than it did the Shamrock Motel or anything else because they were constantly having to feed me these lines. It was so overwhelming. I felt like I was in so much pain. I felt like I was going to pass out.
Yeah, well, sucked out of you.
And between what I felt in that house and by the time I got to the ambush site, I was wiped out. You can ask my husband. I fell asleep because he was driving the rental around to drop me off in every location or whatever, and he'd come back when I was ready. He'd come back and pick me up, and so he was kind of there. I fell asleep before we could even get to the hotel. I just passed out. I was just done. After 10 hours of being on camera, I was just done. And I blame it all on all of the pain that I felt in those two locations.
I can believe that.
Most intense was in the house. And then I look at something else too, because like I said, it's a very religious family. On his end table, by his it wasn't by his couch. I can't remember what was over in that corner of the room. I kind of got a blind spot in my memory there. I can't remember what was sitting over there, but there was it was right there at the staircase that you could go down.
Mm-hmm.
There was a little chair and a little lamp and stand right there. It was his Bible. And that thing was beat all to pieces, just coming apart at the seams. And I'm like, there's a man that was troubled looking for something right there.
Absolutely.
And to me, that's an image I never forgot. I didn't say he was a religious person. I didn't make him a saint. I didn't make him a Christian or a sinner. That was just a man looking for an answer. Mm-hmm. And to me, that was the biggest thing that I've seen at his house. And I've got a picture of it.
Yeah.
That I saved because that's the pain. You could almost see it right there in that book.
Well, I think a lot of people that have only watched Walking Tall or haven't been beyond that. I don't think a lot of people know that there's a couple of pictures even in the Corvette prior to that he has the Bible's actually on the dash. He actually has the Bible. You can actually see that. I've seen a couple of those. So yeah, I mean he definitely did have a Bible and stuff. He kept with him and stuff. And I think that's the part that you don't ever hear or see in Walking Tall or things when they do that, because that's something that the Hollywood part of it doesn't want to. They want to sensationalize the stuff that he did and add stuff in, but they don't want to. They certainly don't want to put that in. That's just my take.
Well, they don't want to put the pain in there. How many nights was he drunker than a skunk, sitting there looking through Psalms trying to find some peace?
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
And he did, and you're right.
Sitting there like that.
And we do know, we do know that he drank, but we also know that he was in a lot of pain, physical and emotional both, and that should not come as any surprise to anybody in modern times. Also, something else that a lot of people don't talk about. The being shot and having your wife shot in front of you, PTSD. You didn't know what that was back then. I mean, obviously he had it. Yeah, he had to have it.
Yeah, I'm the armchair psychologist. That's actually what I was going to talk about this evening when I record my self-help podcast and PTSD and complex PTSD and how it affects your body. And I study all this stuff, how the brain works and all that kind of stuff, because I'm trying to help victims learn how to live again, know. And but people don't understand when you come through trauma like that, how it changes you. Literally, it changes your biochemistry. It changes the way your brain fires. All those little electric neurons that are just bouncing back and forth. Those change. It reroutes them and causes damage. And so, just seeing that kind of brutality and feeling that brutality, it's something that would have tormented him for the rest of his life. And I don't think he was, I'll be blunt. I don't think he was man enough to do that purposely to himself. I don't think he was.
No, I don't think so. I can't buy that. I can't, and like you said, I mean, everything points totally at opposite of that.
Yeah.
And another thing is, and I'll let Danielle come back on here in just a second. The other thing about that is the risk of it going the wrong way. I mean, If that were the case and something went wrong, we would know a different story, wouldn't we?
Exactly. There was no way to hide it if you screwed up.
Yeah, exactly. Because you're gone. You probably killed yourself.
Well, and you know how it is, though, when, dealing with people that have been divorced or gone through a lot of trauma with their spouse or lost a spouse, the most important thing in your life is the children.
Yes.
And I don't see him doing that to his daughter.
No. No
matter how much trouble him and Pauline were having.
Yeah.
I don't see him doing that to Diwana.
Yeah. I do not see that either.
There is nothing in his character that shows he would put that much damage on his daughter.
No. Despite what some people have tried to say otherwise, but we know that, we know what we're dealing with there. But anyway, so let me let Danielle come back in here and see what else she would like to ask you about all this stuff, this fascinating stuff that we've talked about today. Danielle, go ahead and ask anything to Synova you'd like to ask.
Anything. I've always been interested in true crime. What advice would you give somebody to an aspired true crime writer who wants to enter the field? What advice? You've been through it for years.
Well, the first thing is you need to understand, the very first advice you need is you need to be able to, you're going to see a lot of things that are uncomfortable. You're going to read a lot of things that are devastating, and you're going to have to be able to put a wall up for that. And that goes for, anybody that's in law enforcement or investigations. They all have to do that. And that's something you're going to have to get really good at, because you're going to see things that you are going to see the depravity of mankind like you've never seen it before. And so if you can't put that wall up, I don't recommend it. Next thing is, the main advice is do what we talked about before. Take all of the information in. Don't go into it with a preconceived notion. Don't allow your emotions to get in the way of the investigation. Take all of the information. Look at it like a puzzle. Put those pieces together. If they fit, great. If they don't fit, fine. You can't get emotionally involved in where this fact fits in and where that fact fits in, or you're going to start manipulating those facts to fit into the narrative you think is right. So you have to learn to take all of the information, all of the truth, all of the false, they say there's 3 sides to every story. Take all 3 sides and realize truth is in the middle somewhere. And that's the best advice I got.
Well, thank you. That's really good advice. Also, if someone wants to read your books or listen to a podcast, how can they get a hold of you?
Well, like I said, I've been on hiatus for 3 years. I'm actually actively, I had hundreds of videos online and on my website and everything, and I'm actively putting them back up. I had a whole series of Dixie Mafia stuff and Buford Pusser stuff and everything, and it was kind of counteracting some of the negativity that was out there. But then when I transitioned away, I slowly started taking some of that stuff down, and I regret that because now it's not there to counterbalance. So I am actually actively putting it all back up on my YouTube channel, putting it all back up on my website. You look up YouTube / Synova Inc. or Synova Cantrell, I think is what it is, and that's my YouTube channel. SynovaInc.com is my website. You can see me on Facebook, on Instagram, all that. But you can read all that, and then of course my books are all on Amazon. You can get them from Amazon. But yeah, it'll all be out there soon.
Yeah. Okay, so Magnum, you'll have the information to her links.
Yeah, I'm going to make sure that we have your links. And if you want to, you can just shoot them to me on Messenger or whatever, and I will make sure that we get them all up, because I'll try to get the show up later tonight or by the earliest tomorrow. This has been a fascinating show, and I certainly am honored that you've been here, and it is so interesting, the stuff that you brought up from the Dixie Mafia to Buford Pusser. I'm glad that you're coming back. I'm glad you're putting that counter out there, because I think we need that counter. And certainly, I hope that this does move things forward, and I hope the TBI does find that answer, because if nothing else, for the family, the family that is left that did agree to this. I mean, and like I said, and I'll say this long, it's a shame if it all turns out to be exactly like Buford Pusser said. It's going to be a shame that Buford Pusser didn't live, and that DeWanna's not here either, because DeWanna did a lot of stuff trying to defend her father, and it's just a shame that neither one of them are here. At the possibility, and again, this is pending, the possibility that this may finally come to an end and have the answer.
Right. Right. Yeah. So we just all got to keep a lookout. But I will send you the links to my stuff. And as I put out, I'm putting out all my old stuff, and I'm making new stuff as we go. So as I put it out, I'll send you some links and things so you can follow it. But
okay.
I appreciate you guys having me on. Like I said, I'm a little bit rusty.
Thanks for being here.
It's been a while since I dug into all this, but. Wow. I don't know. I'm passionate about it because it's just one of those stories that if it doesn't grip your heart, I'm wondering if you still have a heart.
Right.
Either way, whatever side you're on of this little propaganda war of if he's good, if he's bad, you can't not be touched by the story. And I'd just like to see a conclusion for it. I think DeWanna and Buford, obviously, but I think DeWanna deserves to have closure to something she fought so hard for, too, because she fought just as hard as her dad. She may have not been shot and stabbed and all that stuff, but she fought her whole life.
And she went through a lot of emotional trauma.
Well, she had so much trauma. You can't imagine how much trauma she had to go through. And and yet she still stood up. And see, that's where I think really gets me is they stood up anyways. It was hard, but they stood up anyways, and they stood up again and again. And DeWanna did the same thing. She stood up even though it was hard. And I'm just anxious to hear what the TBI comes up with.
Amen. All right. Well, thank you so much, Synova, for being here, and
thank you.
I'll be closing the show out. Thank you so much. Have a good day.
Thank you.
Yeah. All right. We'll talk to you again soon. Thank you so much, Synova.
Thanks for being here. Bye.
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 Thank you.
Give me just a second.